Hi everyone, happy Monday and welcome back to another episode. Today we're diving into a fascinating topic, multipotentialites. I couldn't even pronounce it the first time I heard of this term. It's a unique gift of having many interests and creative pursuits, and I couldn't think of a better guest to explore this with than someone you may remember from an earlier episode. Thomas is back with us today, a seasoned coder and internet developer who began embracing his creative side in his mid 50s, from building uh, printing blocks to painting watercolors and many more. He has his own podcast as well. He loves designing automata. He's a living example of what it means to be a modern day uh, multi-potentialite. And his journey is a reminder that it's never too late to rediscover curiosity, explore multiple passions, and allow ourselves to evolve. And I came to know about this term from him only. And I actually learned a lot from this episode uh, from Thomas because I had a lot of questions in my mind regarding this subject. So let's welcome Thomas again and unpack what it truly means to be a multipotentialite.
Okay.
Okay. So, first of all, because you actually introduced me to this concept of
Uh-huh.
multipotentialites, tell us what this term means and how did you realize that you are also a multi-potentialite? Yeah.
Yeah, so multipotentialite um, is sort of the same as the term polymath or the term Renaissance man, or I like to say Renaissance soul. And and the idea about multipotentialites are that we are interested in a great many things. Our interests go everywhere, and one of the sort of aspects is that we don't tend to specialize in just one thing because our curiosity drives us to want to just research all these different things to find out about different things. So that is, in a nutshell, is what a multi-potentialite is, or what the multi-potentialite trait is. I found out about it actually from my coach, and I had learned about the HSP trait, the highly sensitive person trait, and met a great coach uh, through that, and she was, we'd been coaching for a while, and she said one day, you should check out this idea of multipotentiality. You should go find. There's a TED talk by Emily Wapnick, um, and the name escapes me at the moment, but it's essentially, for people who don't have one true calling. I think
Mhm.
I think the title is something like that. And so, yeah, I went ahead and watched it, and it's like, wow, yeah, that describes me very well.
Mhm.
Emily in her TED talk talks about how there are people in the world that struggle to focus on just one thing.
Yeah.
and and so I started reading about it a little bit. There's a fantastic book called "Refuse to Choose" by Barbara Sher, and she talks about her own journey discovering multipotentiality. In
Mhm.
her book, she calls it scanner. Um, it's a fine term, but I actually prefer multipotentialite. Multipotentialite sort of expresses the idea very well,
Yeah.
like just multiple curiosities, multiple things that you're interested in.
Right. And let's also talk about like picking one thing because I think like when even for me like when I look around and I see someone specializing in that one particular thing, there is
Uh-huh.
always a pressure. If like somebody, so as a freelancer also, I do a lot
Hmm.
of projects because I'm interested in all those projects. But if
Yeah.
somebody asks me, what do you specialize in? How do you navigate, that pressure?
Well, what's interesting is that in in the Renaissance era, uh, like Leonardo da Vinci, he's sort of the prototype Renaissance man or multi-potentialite. And in that time, nobody would ask that question. In fact, it was sort of looked upon as, wow, you're a person of many interests. That's great. Same as during Ben Franklin's time. He was
Hmm.
also a multi-potentialite. He had all these different interests. He was in statecraft, and he was in various science things and in politics. Nobody blinked an eye if you said that you were into, you know, uh, politics and optics and whatever.
Hmm.
It's only recently, I think, and I don't know for sure, but my guess is that when the Industrial Revolution came along, and factory work came along, it was
Hmm.
very helpful to be specialized in something, because then you could basically be put in a particular function
Right.
in a factory or in a company or whatever. And so it's really more recent that people say, well, what do you specialize in? What are you doing? Um, so when people ask that to me, I just say, oh, I do everything. Um, and people are taken aback because that's not a very typical answer,
Yeah.
but it's true. In my work, I'm a freelancer. I do software development. When someone comes to me and says, well, I have this idea, do you think you can do it? And I say, oh, I'm sure I can. 5 years ago, I would have said, great, I'll just Google it. I go to
Yeah.
Google and, I figure out, like, are there, certain libraries? How are other people doing it?
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, so I would say yes a lot. Nowadays, with chatbots, with OpenAI and ChatGPT, it's even more fun
Hmm.
because now
Yeah.
you can go to ChatGPT and say, I'm wanting to build this in this way, and because I have this sort of breadth of knowledge, like, for in software engineering, I can do back end stuff on the servers. I know how to do front end stuff. I'm not a designer, but I know how to, get things uh, dynamic on a web page. Um, so when I am conversing with ChatGPT, for instance, to create something, my multi-potentialite experience and background helps me say, oh, I need this and I need that. And oh, by the way, what about this?
Hmm. Okay. But have you ever struggled with identity also? I mean, like, yeah, it's, I think in a way it's freeing also. Like, we can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I, so I have two answers to that. The first answer is that I've always known that I was a generalist.
Hmm.
So when I started in Silicon Valley, I was very lucky to be hired as straight out of college as a test engineer.
Hmm.
And as a test engineer, you're basically required to do all these different things to put together tests and things like that. And I quickly figured out, like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to be, and there was no, like, there's no university for test engineers. There's no classes for test engineers. You basically have to learn as you go.
Hmm.
It's different if you were, let's say, designing silicon, or you're designing, back then it would be microprocessor circuits or whatever. Um, there you would have a certain amount of training for it, but for test engineering, no, because it was whatever the job needed at that moment. And so I knew from pretty much from the get-go, when I got out of college, that I wanted to be a generalist, and I was a generalist.
Hmm.
the struggle that I had was not so much what the outside world was wanting, but it was what the inside world was wanting.
Yeah.
Because when you grow up, you look at all these people around you that master things that they become uh, you know world-class violists, and that they had to practice for thousands of hours to do their craft, and you start comparing yourself, right? Your inner critic starts talking up and says, well, why can't you be like that? I know that I am skilled in a lot of different things, but I can't point to, let's say, here's something that I do that would be equivalent to that, right?
Hmm.
So the struggle that I had was I was always criticizing. I had my own internal critic saying, yeah, why do you always start all these things and never finish them? Or, why do you go down all these rabbit holes? Or why do you let your curiosity go all over the place?
Yeah.
You seem like you're scattered. That's what I overcame once I understood multipotentiality.
Right. So, like, how did you overcome that? Because that I have the tendency to do the same. Like,
Uh-huh.
I'll start, many projects because I
Yeah,
genuinely
so
want. Yeah.
so here's the thing about that. Um, for me, it was basically redefining what completion or finishing means.
Hmm.
So the sort of the classic definition of finishing something means you start a project and you see it all the way through to the end and then you finish. That's sort of the classic definition. I've redefined that for myself. For me, finishing or completing or whatever I want to call it is simply that I started something. And here's the reason. I I let myself now go into whatever direction I want to go to because I don't know where it's going to lead. Oftentimes I'll start a project or I'll start reading a book or go down whatever, and like I'll open a book and I'll just read one chapter, just as an example, right? Or I'll start a project and I'm figuring out like how does this glue work or whatever it might be, as I'm building a collage or whatever. Um, if I if it brought me joy and I learned something, that's success. That's it. That's my definition of completing. Did
Yeah.
did, did it bring me joy, and did I learn something? Because here's the thing, I may come back to that later because I'll be down some other rabbit hole and I'll say, oh, this this thing sort of is similar to this other thing that I did 6 months ago, and what I learned there now I can use here.
Hmm.
So whatever I did, even if I just read that one chapter, or if I just tried a collage for just for fun, it wasn't wasted time. It was
Yeah.
learning.
It brings you joy. Yeah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And what have you found most challenging and most rewarding about, being a multi-potentialite? I mean, for me, it was like I can learn, a lot of things because I wanted to learn programming also, editing also,
Uh-huh.
writing, coloring, gardening, this and that. So that's,
Yeah.
rewarding also. But then again, keeping up with all these projects is challenging as well. For you, what was the most challenging part of it and what was the most rewarding part of it?
Wow, there's lots of challenges. I, you know, the you mentioned gardening, and I love gardening. I grow orchids, and I've had to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got too many, and when you have more and more plants to take care of, it just takes more and more time.
Right.
So the real challenge um, is a part of the challenge is time management.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you when you create time to do something, you are also letting go of something else.
Hmm.
So just as an example, I've had to, I mean, I haven't let it completely go. I still have several orchids, but I've had to thin out my collection because it takes too much time. You know, even though I
Yeah.
enjoy the process, I'm enjoying all this other stuff too. So that's part of it, letting go. Another challenge is sometimes waking up in the morning and just it's like decision paralysis. Like, oh, I have all these things I want to work on. Which one?
Yeah.
Which one do I work on? Um, and so I've created some structures around that that helps me um, to um, to not overthink it and to just say, okay, today I'm working on this,
Mhm.
and and um, and then I don't have to. Then I don't get into that decision paralysis problem.
Right.
The other part of the question was, uh,
The most rewarding experience.
wow, all of it, I think. I
Hmm.
mean, it's just rewarding to know. I mean, the I don't know how to say it. It's just rewarding itself to be blessed with just a endless curiosity.
Hmm.
I mean, I could I could spend hours in a bookstore,
Yeah.
right?
Me too.
Um, and I wouldn't have any idea going in what book I'm looking for, right? I would
Mhm.
just like, oh, I'm in a bookstore now. This is great. I'm going to look, first I'm going to go to history, and then I'm going to go to language, and then I'm going to go to architecture, and then I'm going to go to arts, and then eventually I come out with a couple of books
Mhm.
um, that I had no idea that existed or whatever, but they just seem interesting. And then, um, like I said, I might read a chapter or I might read two chapters. With the way that I approach books is I open it up and see what interests me, or I'll go to
Yeah.
the table of contents and find a chapter that's interests me. I rarely read a book from front to back. Sometimes I do, but
Yeah.
oftentimes a lot of the books I buy a lot of nonfiction. I'm not big on. I don't read a lot of fiction, but
Mhm.
I have a whole library of nonfiction books, and they act as my library. Sometimes it's like I just want to jog my brain. I pull something out, start reading it,
Right.
and then go from there.
Yeah. And sometimes I even buy certain books, but I never get the time to, read. But I'm
Uh-huh.
just happy that, they are there.
Yeah, yeah. I have a
Okay.
few of those too.
Yeah. And one more thing, obsession with, because like in life, we have obsession with certain goals. Like we know that, these are our long-term goals. And sometimes like we are just curious about something,
Uh-huh.
right? So that is sort of like a temporary, uh, yeah, temporary pursuit, I can say. How
Uh-huh.
do you discern, like, how do you differentiate between, these two? Whether I'm going to, follow it for long term or it's just a curiosity.
Um, you know, different multipotentialites have different ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some multipotentialites, and this is covered in Barbara Sher's book, by the way. There's some that will do a deep dive into something, and then they'll never touch it again for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that was an obsession for a short time, for a few weeks, for months, or whatever. And then they got everything that they needed out of it, and then it was like, okay, I'm going to move on to something else. I'm actually what she calls a cyclical scanner, so someone who comes back to things.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an example, one of my passions is model railroading, and I have about half of the garage is filled with a model railroad. Um, I've been doing that since I was 3 years old because my dad had a model railroad, and
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up with it, and it's just part of me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't touch it for 6 months at a time, like it just sits there, and I'm obsessing about other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, that's the only thing I want to do for the next 4 weeks is to
Mm-hmm.
work on the model railroad. So for me, it's cyclical. It's almost like seasons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have my own seasons. Sometimes I just want to go fishing all the time. I love
Yeah.
fishing. Sometimes I want to be working on my model railroad and building miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
I've been uh, fiddling around with Ableton Live, which is music production, and I'm also working on block printing, which is
Mm-hmm.
a an art technique,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I was thinking a lot about block printing today, in fact.
Yeah. And has there been a moment where you maybe want to pursue something, but because of, other priorities, it is still like on your mind, but you are never able to actually do it?
Yeah, I have a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in fact, part of the system that I came up with was to take a little bit of time, maybe 5, 10 minutes every weekend, like on a Sunday, and write down like this is all the stuff I'm interested in doing. Um, it's not a it's not a like a task list or a checklist. It's like a want to do list, and it's just there to remind me. It's just there to say, oh, you know, this is uh, something that I may want to pursue. You know, I might have half an hour, and then I could go onto YouTube and do a little research about it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that piece of paper serves as a just a like a reminder. I can look at it every day and say, "Oh yeah, I'm still interested in that," or "No, actually, my interests have shifted."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's helpful. Um, I think the challenge is the big challenge is making time and making a decision. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I've had to do is I've had to come up with rituals. And the ritual that I have is like the first thing in the morning that I do is I try to think about like what am I really excited about today,
Yeah.
right? And so after breakfast I'll spend a little bit of time just thinking about that. I may break open a book like I said, right now I'm interested in block printing, so I have a couple of books on block printing. So I'll have them on the dining room table ready for me, so
Okay.
that right after breakfast I can look through it and get excited about that. And then after work, and right before dinner, I go and I prepare my art table. I
Mm-hmm.
clean it up. There's usually a whole bunch of stuff that I left over from the night before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I clean it up. It's all clean, ready to go. I might have to put a few items there that I'll be using to do whatever that I want to do. And then after dinner is when I have most of my time to work on my art or work on the trains or whatever it is that I want to work on. Um, and and so that's nice. I have a nice chunk of time. Notice I I don't watch a lot of TV.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have been watching Star Wars Andor. That's been a nice show. But in large part, I consciously keep that time after dinner to work on my whatever it is that I want to work on.
Yeah.
So that's become a ritual. That's sort of become, I call it my sacred time. It's semi-sacred, you know, it's like it's there. And unless I have other commitments, you know, family commitments, going out with Joyce or whoever, um, you know, family, whatever it might be, usually that time after dinner is reserved for being creative.
Yeah. And your wife's name is also Joy?
Joyce, yes.
Joyce, yeah. When you said, it brought me joy, it reminded me of that.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. But I loved, the idea of creating want to do list, right? And in Atomic Habits book
Mm,
also, the
uh-huh.
author, talks about creating systems. Have you read the book?
I have not read about it.
Yeah, so it's the same concept, like,
Uh-huh.
creating systems around, your habits so you can keep up with them. And
It's really important as a multi-potentialite to have rituals and routines.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a multi-potentialite, you just want to go everywhere. You want to go in whatever direction, and that can be a problem, especially in the evening when you're tired. You worked all
Yeah.
day. We're freelancing, right? So we're working all day, and then at the end, it's like, okay, what do I want to do now? And and so having those rituals and routines in place is really, really important.
Right.
Um, it's sort of um, a real good partner for
Mhm.
multipotentiality.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. And tell us something about your podcast also, because I didn't have the time to, catch up with your recent episodes. So, how has
Well,
it been? Yeah.
so I have two podcasts.
And I also,
Uh,
sorry to interrupt you, I also want to add something because you also connect with, different people on your
uh-huh,
podcast, right?
yeah.
Has it like helped you connect the dots when it comes to, being a multi-potentialite and having, so many curiosities? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have two podcasts, and full disclosure, I haven't made an episode this year, and that's okay. That is a sort of a very typical thing for a multi-potentialite. Is we'll start something, and then uh, sometimes I'll create a whole bunch of episodes, and then I just leave it alone. Just like my model railroad, sometimes I just leave it alone for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the creative shoe fly, which is all about, how do I get out of my own way? And I think the reason that I haven't had an episode for creative shoe fly is because I created these rituals, and they've been working very well.
Mm-hmm.
So so getting out of my own way hasn't been on my mind very much. The other podcast is You and I Make a Thing, and You and I Make a Thing actually is was born out of multipotentiality. Um, as a multipotentialite, we're really good at at being a beginner, because we like to start new things that we've never done before, and so we're really good at being beginners. We're not afraid to jump into something new and
Mm-hmm.
give something a try. So I was pondering this. This goes back now several years. I was pondering, like, how could I make a podcast that really satisfies my multi-potentiality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up with this idea of You and I Make a Thing. And what happens is that I'll invite a guest to come on the episode, and we come up with something that both of us can make that we both have never made before. And usually it's around art. It's around creating something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go off, and so in the first part of the episode we decide what it is that we're going to make. And then we go off and we make it, and then we come and record a second part of the episode and talk about how it felt. Like, how did it feel to make something, that we've
Yeah.
never made before. So as an example, the most recent episode of You and I Make a Thing is I invited my friend Allison to make a marionette, a puppet on
Yeah. Yeah.
strings. And both of us have never made one before. And she is actually a comic artist, so she draws.
Mm-hmm.
She's never made anything three-dimensional, so she went ahead and volunteered to make the head. And I had never sewn anything. I'd never like created clothes out of fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned how to sew. I used Joyce's sewing machine, and I got the manual, and I figured out, how to thread the the thread and load the bobbin up and all that kind of stuff. And I made the clothes,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's how we created this marionette.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing is that both of us, this always happens in every You and I Make a Thing episode, is that it's there's a struggle part, right? Because
Yeah.
even though we're beginners, there's still like that learning part you have to overcome. Or like in my case, um, I was a little unsure, like how well I could learn to sew on a sewing machine by myself, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I had some butterflies about that, but you know, we managed and we created this very interesting looking marionette.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the You and I Make a Thing podcast, and I love it because as a host, I know that with every episode, I'm going to be making something I've never done before,
Yeah.
and that's exciting in itself.
Right. And let me just, put on these glasses. I mean, I don't use glasses, but I
Uh,
don't know why today. Uh, yeah, I don't know. These are screen glasses actually.
yeah,
Okay, so 10 minutes we have.
yeah.
Um,
It's the
one more
same with
thing.
me. See, I have these glasses and I have the screen glasses.
Yeah, because I have to, work a lot on the screen. So
Yeah,
sometimes it really, my eyes start watering. And I don't
yeah.
know, because these days I'm working a lot, so maybe that's why.
Uh-huh.
And I also wanted to ask you, like, if let's say many potentialites, I believe, they feel, because earlier I also had this struggle, like you feel like you are not enough because of,
Uh-huh.
having these many interests. Again,
Yeah.
going back to that, uh, specializing in one thing. What will be your advice to someone who has maybe discovered, this term today, and now they know they are multipotentialites, and they feel, overwhelmed, and they still have that feeling of not being, good enough?
Well, so first of all, you're fine as you are.
Mm.
The you know what I would say is what Emily Wapnick says in her TED Talk, and I would definitely watch her TED Talk because it's very, very inspiring. She says, embrace your inner wiring, right?
Mhm.
Embrace the fact that you are a multi-potentialite and that you have this wonderful way of going down all these different paths and interests. Um, and one thing that she points out, which I think is very, very valid, and that is that there's nothing wrong with being a specialist, right? There are
Yeah.
many, many people who know exactly what they want to do in the world, and they go do it, and they become very good at it. Um, what's wonderful is when you get a team of a multi potentialite and a specialist together. The
Hmm.
specialist can focus on what they're doing, and the multi potentialite can say, "Oh, have you considered this? Have you considered that?
Yeah.
I ran across this." So they make really good teams, especially in companies when you have a multi potentialite and a specialist working together on a team.
Hmm.
So that's one thing to realize is that your skill and your trait and who you are is is very useful in the world. It's not something that should ever be looked down upon. The other thing that I would say is go find other multi potentialites. You know, they're
Hmm.
out there. Um, we're not that rare.
Yeah.
There are online forums of multi potentialites. There's one called the Puttyverse. It is a paid forum, and so it is a somewhat of a commitment in terms of cost if you want to join the Puttyverse. But one thing that I would say is that the Puttyverse is a great place to meet other multi potentialites. And even if you don't subscribe for the whole year, you might subscribe for a couple months just to meet some people and see what other multi potentialites are doing in the world. It's a
Hmm.
wonderful online forum. I'm a member of it. I've been a member since 2020, I believe, and I've made some really great friendships there.
Hmm. Okay. And how do you think society, supports multi-potentialites, or even organizations?
Well, uh, going back to that first job that I had,
Hmm.
every company will have jobs that are not specialist based, right? They're more generalist.
Hmm.
Um, those are the jobs that I would seek out.
Yeah.
I would. I would try to find the types of jobs where you have to go and do all kinds of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes they have very unglamorous, names like admin or logistics or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would look for that. Many multi-potentialites are freelancers. That can be very rewarding if you are in a good place to do that. If you have support with a partner, let's say. Um, what else can I say? Uh, like I said, the world needs it, and especially right now with when as technology changes and the world is always changing very rapidly. Multi-potentialites are always very well situated to understand what's going on and to see sort of over the horizon. Um, yeah, don't be afraid of it. Stand your ground, as I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that was it. I had actually a lot of questions, on this subject. And
Uh-huh.
I wasn't able to, get somebody who I could talk to about, this subject. So I'm
Uh-huh.
glad to have you on board. Thank you so much for making
Oh,
time for this.
yeah. I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Yeah.